Okay, so what we're diving into today, it's this really powerful story of hardship, of faith, and ultimately of survival. It's all about a group of people who basically traded everything they knew for a promise in a land they had never even seen before. Just try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine traveling thousands of miles to your new home, this place you've dreamed of, only to arrive and be met with this. Absolutely nothing. I mean, nothing. The very building blocks of a community. The basic stuff we all take for granted. It was just not there. They were starting from scratch in the most literal way you can imagine. And that's what it all boils down to, right? These are the two forces that are going to define everything that happens next. On one hand, you've got this relentless, chaotic force of nature they have to endure. And on the other, this unshakable force inside them that's going to help them do it. It's a classic conflict, the world outside versus the conviction within. So, what did this new reality actually look like? Let's paint a picture of the land they were now supposed to call home. So, when the Mennonite settlers from the Rhinelander and Sommerfelder congregations got to Chihuahua, this is what greeted them. Not some promised land flowing with milk and honey, but this, a harsh, unforgiving landscape. It wasn't a town, it wasn't a village, they just called it the camp. And that's a pretty powerful reminder that a community doesn't start with buildings, it starts with a shared name for a piece of ground and a common hope.
With absolutely no structures to greet them, their very first job, their most urgent task, was just to create shelter, to carve out some kind of space for family and community from this vast emptiness.
And this was their first town. It wasn't built of wood or stone, but of canvas and rope and just sheer determination. You can almost hear that sound, can't you? The wind just whipping through these makeshift homes, a constant nagging reminder of how fragile everything was. But this is what people do. We build, even with almost nothing, just to create a sense of place against the vastness. And yet, in the evenings, a totally different sound would rise up from the camp. This hymn, it translates to, "I am a guest on earth," and it became their anthem. It's such a profound statement, this idea that their true home wasn't this patch of cracked dirt, but something much, much bigger. Their physical hardship was temporary. Their spiritual conviction was their real anchor. But that spiritual anchor, it was about to be tested. Every single day. The initial challenge of just building a shelter, that quickly gave way to the relentless daily grind of pure survival. Think about this trio of survival. First, the back-breaking work of digging for water by hand. Imagine the joy when they finally found it. Then the desperation for food, to the point where they're boiling cactus leaves just to have something to eat. And finally, the terror of illness sweeping through the camp. With no doctors, no medicine, they had to rely on old knowledge, on each other, and on prayer when there was nothing else left. And this is where that abstract struggle becomes just horribly personal. For the Friesen family, the sickness wasn't just a community problem anymore. It was an intimate, heartbreaking loss that took their youngest child. It's a moment that just grounds their whole ordeal in a very real human cost. So, in the face of that unimaginable grief, what do you do? Well, for them, their belief system offered a direct response. This verse, this wasn't just some words in a book. It was a lifeline. It was a promise of comfort right in the middle of desolation, and it reinforced the very faith that brought them there in the first place. You'd think things couldn't possibly get worse, right? Well, just as they were grappling with sickness and loss, the land itself decided to rise up against them in a truly terrifying way. This wasn't just a storm. It was an event, an apocalypse in miniature. The description of a wall of red wind, it paints this picture of something monstrous, something unstoppable, a force of nature that's about to tear their fragile world completely apart. And the chaos was just absolute. The sky goes dark, their homes are literally ripped from the ground, wagons are flipping over, the very air becomes an enemy, burning your eyes, scorching your throat. And then, after hours of this relentless noise and violence, just an exhausted silence. So here's the crucial point. What happened next? The morning after, they find their camp destroyed, their tools buried, everything is in ruins. But their spirit wasn't. They didn't despair. They rose. They immediately started to rebuild. And this is the incredible part. They sang. This is probably the most profound testament to their resilience, that in the face of total material destruction, their first collective act wasn't to weep, but to raise their voices together.
So this ordeal, this trial by wind and dust, it didn't break them. In fact, it did the opposite. It actually solidified their entire purpose for being there.
Their leader, Bishop Dyke, gives this incredible sermon standing right there among the ruins. And he completely reframes their whole experience. He reminds them, look, we didn't come here because we were promised an easy life. We came here because we were promised freedom, freedom to practice our faith. That is such a powerful act of leadership, reframing suffering not as a defeat, but as part of the price for a much greater purpose. And this comparison really gets to the core of their identity. It's such a powerful lesson, you know? What they lacked was all physical stuff, a nation, buildings, a map. But what they had, that was intangible, and it was so much more powerful. A sacred promise, a unified community, and a clear sense of purpose. It really shows that the true strength of a community isn't in its infrastructure, but in its shared values. And this right here is the thought that held it all together. They weren't just building a camp in the desert. They were looking for something eternal. Their real city wasn't made of canvas or even stone, but of faith. It kind of forces you to ask, right, when everything physical is stripped away, what are the true foundations that we rely on to rebuild? Is it what we can see and touch, or is it something else entirely?